The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Part of the beauty of friendship is that with the word community, there's kind of a sense of sameness. With friendship, there's diversity in that, and there's relationship. You know, it's not that we're together because we agree on everything. That we're friends because we are, we work together through things, and we have a relationship.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. I've known Greg Wilbur for more than 30 years. We met in the early 90s, not long after we had both moved to Nashville, and we've been friends ever since. Greg is a founder of New College Franklin and now Dean of Students. He lured me out of academic retirement around 2011, and we've taught together at New College for 10 years. Greg is also a composer and a church musician. He recently released a new album of hymns and psalms called Securely I Will Dwell, Songs for the Church. Greg Wilbur, I sure am glad to have you on the Habit Podcast today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Your new project is an album of hymns and songs for the church called Securely I Will Dwell.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Yes, it's 14 songs. It's hymns and psalms and some service music as well that have a variety of friends participate in terms of bringing these songs to life. But primarily, these are things that I wrote for our local congregation, and now have gathered these together in a form that kind of actually essentially walks through the idea of a worship service from a prelude to a benediction with different pieces along the way, whether confession or communion or songs about the word, but it moves thematically through various psalms and hymns.
You said service music. What does that term mean?
Pieces that are used occasionally like a benediction or a Kyrie or response. Like, for example, one of the songs is basically a single verse, single lyric, which is a more of a response. We've turned it into something a little bit more than that, but then the pieces that are used in response to various elements of the service. Yeah,
you mentioned that you've got a lot of friends involved, and many of them from Nashville or Franklin, and many of them not. So I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, there's I have a kind of a unique place in that as a songwriter, as a composer, I am not usually the one who presents my own work. And so that I rely on others to do so. Yeah. So I have a variety of singers and players who have selected or have been friends who've taken that on, and that's been people that some people I've known for a long time, some people I've become friends with in the last few years. but who are willing and to be part of the project. And so it's fun sharing that aspect with them and seeing what they bring to it.
Mm-hmm.
A collaborative work.
Yeah, I had not. It wasn't until you just said what you said that it occurred to me. Composer, the difference between a composer and a songwriter is the composer almost never performs his or her own work.
Right.
Is that the difference?
Well, no, I mean, I think I don't know. Probably in normal parlance, we talk about songwriter that would be, and a composer would be different kind of genres. You think of a composer, you think more serious music, and like orchestral or film scores or things like that. And songwriter would be more songs with lyrics, that type of shorter form. And so it's there's both and. But I mean, it's different in the world of like, streaming and so forth, when we so easily identify the artist of a song with the person who's singing it, not necessarily the person who created it. So it's kind of odd. So in terms of even like the cover design, as the one unifying factor is that these are all songs that I wrote or wrote with collaboratively, but then there's a whole bunch of other people who sang the songs and they're part of this project as well. So it's both and.
Yeah. The lyrics you wrote and co-wrote the lyrics.
Or yes, some original, some co-wrote, but then others are old hymn lyrics or versified psalms that I've set to music that's more singable or accessible to a congregation.
The versified psalms. Did you versify the psalms, or you just rounded those up from?
Rounded those up from various older psalters. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about collaboration. I'm always, a little jealous of musicians who just about can't do what they do without collaboration. Instead of writers, like me, have to sit alone and for the most part do what we do. But so many collaborators on this. You used a phrase in an email to me that I want to know what you mean by this. You talked about artistic vision in other people's hands, which sounds a little bit like a negative way of saying collaboration to me.
And I actually meant that
instead of saying, it sounds to me like collaboration is a nice way, a positive way to say it, and handing my vision over to other people, putting it in other people's hands sounds not as good. I suspect that's not what you meant. So
thank you for airing the private.
Greg.
No, actually, I meant that very much in a very positive way. I think for me, I think there's two aspects of collaboration. One is the collaboration of songwriting together, of actually creating together. And I did more of that on this album than I've ever done on any of my past work. But then the other act of collaboration is letting other people's expertise and vision of bringing a song to life feed into that. So part of that is I don't I have specific ideas in terms of how a song maybe should come together, but at the same time I'm never so sure of myself or prideful. Let me put it that way. That sounds good, right? That other people and their giftings can't bring things to the project that I wouldn't have thought of. And so there's that synergy that happens when other people bring their gifts in, that things that you would never have thought of and that make it better than it is. What's different about this particular project, though, is there are two songs that I completely put in the hands of the folks who were singing. That with the relationship with these actually four folks, a husband and wife did one song, and two guys, a team did another. But I gave them the song and they created it from ground up, from the approach they wanted to take, the production ideas. We worked, we talked about things and made sure that it wasn't out of bounds with what the rest of the project was going to be, but just left it in their hands. Like, take the song and see what happens and what they do to it. And so that was very fun, and being able to let them have the freedom to explore. So, like, for example, one piece that Kirk Sowers and Paul Ranheim did, they and I told them this ahead of time. I said, like, if you want to change a bit of the melody or add a bridge or whatever, feel free. Let's talk about it. And they said, yeah, let's, verse 3, it'd be great if we could, change the melody here and make it a little bit something different. So they sent me a couple ideas, which that was very kind of them to do so. Listened to them, gave back with feedback, and then just let them loose. And so they then added to it their own touch and their own feel, but translating what I'd written into something that fit them. So it was a beautiful thing in terms of the collaborative aspect of turning over the creation of the track for them.
Yeah.
For
them. No twinge of doubt for you?
No.
Yeah.
Well, twinge. No, I don't think so, because I trust what Paul and Kirk had done. The other song was one that Jonathan and Amanda Noel did, and we'd been friends for a long time, and I've seen what they've done with other people's music, and I've just loved their approach and their understanding of music. And so it was just an honor to have them involved. The funny thing, if I can tell a funny story, is they moved away from Nashville years ago, like, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. I run into Jonathan Noel a few times here and there, but I was coming back from a conference in about a year or so ago from South Carolina with a group of students, and stopped off at a Chick-fil-A and heard my name. And at this other table were Jonathan and Amanda and their children having lunch in this random Chick-fil-A off the interstate. And so we wound up talking for about half an hour, and I was in the process of just catching up on life and stuff. We were in the process of putting together this album. I said, would y'all consider doing a song? And I said, absolutely, that'd be great. So we went back and forth on that. So it was just one of those beautifully ordained, random moments of running into them again and pulling them into this project. It was just such a joy to work with them. And so from that standpoint, I've heard what they've done. It's like, I don't, whatever they do is just going to be lovely. So
here's a question. I'm not surprised to hear you say that you didn't feel a twinge of, you're a grown up. You and I are about the same age. So we're men of a certain age, let's say. Has that changed since you were younger? Would 27-year-old Greg have felt different?
Back when we first met?
Yeah. Well, we were younger than that when we first met.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, we knew each other before either one of us were married. Yeah. Yes, I think so. And I think there's a number of things that I could point to just in terms of the ways that spiritual understanding and the path that the Lord led me on in various circumstances and so forth, that you die to some of those things that you need to die to, and that surety that your way is always the best way, and that you've got the best vision, and you've got something special that everybody in the world needs to hear, and needs to hear it the way that you want them to hear it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And figure out, well, where is, what is your role? What's your gifting? I mean, there's lots of new music out there. And so even, what is the presumption of even trying to introduce a new album to the world? Like, what am I saying? Like, am I really supposed to do this? Is there really something in these songs that I think is important that people need to hear, that's going to be helpful to them spiritually, or going to be helpful to them through various difficulties of life? And I think what's helped me, I think, in that too, is that I write for our church primarily. Yeah. And so I'm writing for the specific needs and the specific, whether it's a sermon series or time of the year or text, or, things that are working with and associated with who we are as a local church.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not saying you're writing for the church. You're writing for a church.
I'm writing for a church.
At the corner of 3rd and whatever.
Church. Yeah.
3rd and Church in Franklin. Yeah.
And so because of that, it's the very particular aspect of what I'm called to with these particular people. Yeah. And so I'm not trying to make a career as a musician. That's another death of ambition over the years. That's not who God has called me to be. But if the Lord can use these songs, or if these songs can translate to some other venue, then that's just kind of extra. And
Mm-hmm.
so that takes a lot of pressure off too of trying to think through marketing or what's going to grab somebody. It's like, well, I know these are songs that already mean something to me, already mean something to our community, and
Mm-hmm.
if we can translate. So even the collaborative aspect over the years, whenever somebody walks up to me and says, "Hey, we use this song that you wrote in our church," my one, it always kind of surprises me and amazes me. And two, the next question is, how do you do it? I mean, how does it work in your context?
Mm.
Because I'm thinking about what I do with my church, with my musicians here, um, even to the extent too, like even when I sing other people's songs, I very rarely listen to their original recording for inspiration. I'm thinking about, here's a song, how can I bring this into the context of our congregation? And
Mm-hmm.
so what is it like? And I think this is the fun part for me. What is it like for somebody to take something I've written and then translate it into the context in which they're in? And that's
Yeah.
a lot. And that's also what kind of breathes new life into something, that it fits into that particular local context.
Can you give me some specifics on what it would mean when you say, bringing a song, you don't listen to the original because you're thinking about what the people at Cornerstone Pres need
Mhm.
from that. What do you mean exactly? What might you do differently because it's for the people at that congregation? Are you talking about what key you sing it in because you know what key they can sing in? Probably
That's
not that,
hard
huh?
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, well, that's part of with regards to even philosophy of leading in worship,
Mm-hmm.
that I want things to be very intuitive
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the congregation. I mean, people, maybe this is too broad a generalization, but it seems to me that in general, people are less confident in singing and singing in public and singing in church. And so, and then I think what can be really daunting for someone who's not experienced in that or comfortable in that is if suddenly there's a key change or an unexpected bridge
Mm-hmm.
or a repeat or something or a song they don't know, that actually makes it more difficult for them to enter in. So I mean, so even the musical qualities of how I would lead a piece, even my own music on a Sunday morning versus how I'm going to think about it for recording are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to do it on a Sunday morning in a way that's very intuitive,
Mm-hmm.
very subconscious, that the congregation knows where they're supposed to sing and so forth. So with regards to that, I mean, there are some songs that uh, sometimes I cut a bridge, or
Mm-hmm.
the song is verse one, verse two, then a chorus, and I'll just do verse one, chorus, verse two, chorus, just because I know that it's going to be easier for the church and
Mm-hmm.
to be able to relate to that more easily. And the other thing is, I think there's a um, for better or worse, there's a sense of when you hear something on a recording that people want to emulate that exactly. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
way that they've heard it. That's the way that they conceive of it. And so despite their resources or people that they have available, they try to recreate the recording as opposed to, well, who's God put in our midst? What players do we
Mm-hmm.
have? What singers do we have? How can we do that? What key, whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
that we can do it in our circumstances. And it's kind of trying to think of an analogy, and that is, it's like, there's a lot of different ways to read Shakespeare, to perform Shakespeare,
Yeah.
into the context of which you're doing it, and not just this is the one way in which you're supposed to say to be or not to be. There's
Mm-hmm.
a complexity there, and there's a way to translate that into different interpretations or to the context in which you're doing Hamlet. And it
Yeah.
and it not that I'm comparing what I'm writing to Shakespeare. No, I'm not. But
Oh,
there's
I was trying to picture somebody singing Greg Wilbur songs in sort of, 1940s, uh, you know, uh, USO outfits or
yeah.
something like that, the way people do Midsummer Night's Dream or whatever.
Right. But yeah, it's important. I think that's part of what makes things live on too. And there's I think the best of work has a timelessness to it, because it's connecting to significant themes, eternal themes, and there's a way in which it can be reinterpreted and continue to be reinterpreted and continue to live in various forms over time. And I think that's a beautiful thing about the creative and the recreative endeavor.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned that your collaborators are also friends, some longtime friends, some new friends. And I know, even at New College Franklin, when you and I taught together there, I have a strong sense that your idea of creative work is pretty closely related to your idea of friendship, that friendship is a creative force. What does friendship have to do with this record, or for that matter, your work as the founder and dean of students at New College Franklin?
That's a great question. There's, I mean, to not dismiss the spiritual side of things, I think that's part of what makes it worthwhile. That it's kind of the life-giving force of that it's not, community has become a bit of an overused word, and for a number of reasons, but I think friendship is maybe even a stronger word. There's a long pedigree with the idea of what friendship means. Part of the beauty of friendship is that, with the word community, there's kind of a sense of sameness. With friendship, there's diversity in that, and there's relationship. It's not that we're together because we agree on everything. That we're friends because we are, we work together through things and we have a relationship. And I think Lewis talks about in the Four Loves about how different friends bring out different things within us. And for me, that's very true. There's, I need that outside perspective. I need someone to challenge me on things, and vice versa, and to do so in the context of relationship that makes me, I think, makes me a better writer, but also makes me a better human, makes me a better person, makes me a better follower of Christ. That it's that. Your collaborative living, right? That life together that Bonhoeffer talks about. And I think so. That's, I think, kind of essential in terms of how to go about, with regards to New College. It's education in the context of relationship. It's not about, we want to teach you XYZ things. It's how can we draw out of you through this academic endeavor more beautifully what God has called you to be, to help in terms of the bearing fruit of that. And I think that's the best of all relationships, of friendships, so that we're bringing out of each other the best of one another, the fruit of who we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how your role as an educator impacts your role as a person who does creative work. And I think you just jumped my claim and answered that question already with this idea of drawing out the best of people. But maybe you have more to say about that. If you don't, that's okay. I feel like you already gave me a pretty good answer to the question I was about to ask.
Well, even some of the I don't want to keep beating the idea of collaboration, but in the liner notes, which I know part of the sad thing about the streaming world in which we live in, you don't get all the liner notes in the same kind of way, or even the structure of the album, kind of, like I said, following a worship service. But I dedicated this album to the senior class from last year, and then spoke in specific ways of how their fingerprints are on this album. Whether it's through conversations we've had, or whether direct contribution, or whether, joking around about something that turned into a musical idea, or whatever. That there's a very human connection between relationship with those students, relationship with these other artists, that made this work come into being. And that's kind of inescapable with the way that with the way that I like to work, with the way that this thing has come full circle and it's been created.
Yeah. Well, I love your observation that friendship um, allows for diversity. I mean, there's something about the communities that we find ourselves, um, for lack of a better word, attracted to, tend to get a little homogenous.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that the saying, well, friends are the family you choose. And sometimes I think I'm not sure I chose my friends either. Like, so when I look at my friends, I think I'm not sure I chose these people.
Right.
Somehow they're in my life, and I have people in my life. I think I wouldn't even like you if you weren't my friend.
Well, and there are people who wind up continually crossing your path, whether you like it or not, right? And so there is relationship that gets formed out of that, one way or the other. Yeah, and that's kind of I think part of this. What do you do with that? Do you lean into that? Like if you run into the same person a number of times over a period of years, it's like, is this something that I should be paying attention to and then lean into that and not just try to avoid? What's God trying to tell me through that, or what do I need to learn in this process as well?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that, if you need a minute to think, I'll let you think, and we'll get Henry to cut out the pause. But I love hearing you talk about the music of the spheres, and you're in the quadrivium business, and so I don't know what it's too big of a question to say, tell us about the music of the sphere. I just want to hear you talk about the music of the spheres and why that idea is important to you, and how it relates to the idea of education and cosmology and all these things.
Great, thank you. Oh, Ed, that's a great question, because these things all are interrelated in my own head, and I'll see if I can articulate this in a clearer way. The idea of the music of the spheres, which historically is the idea that there's a song that's being sung by the created order, and that's has several people commenting on that between Plato and Aristotle and Augustine, etc., and Boethius. But moving that aside for a moment, the idea is that in speaking the world into being and singing the world into being in the order that is inherent in creation, and Christ upholding creation, the cosmos, by the word of his power, that there's an aspect of order within how things work together, and that order is in Christ, but it's also reflective of things in relationship to one another. I think we often think about harmony or the idea of life as an imbalance, as opposed to harmony, which is one in which things are in tension.
Yeah,
and so you've got the work of Christ too, is one of bringing shalom, peace, which is the rightness of things, which is also the idea of harmony, justice. Moving from discord to concord is bringing harmony. And so the idea of harmony is musical, yes, but it's also beyond that, in terms of when Scripture talks about having a united heart, or being of one voice, that there's that aspect of being soulishly harmonious, being at peace, at rest. And the idea too, that you can't bring harmony to others if you're in disharmony with yourself, and in various ways, whether that's how you keep your schedule in terms of money, health, etc., or how you keep your relationships, or all of these things have ramifications in terms of what it means to live harmoniously.
Yeah.
And so the connecting point then of what does it mean to bring order? What does it mean to bring order to those things which are chaotic? And recognizing that we live in a broken world, but we also long for the way things were meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all there's always kind of that artistic tension, I think, between representing brokenness or only brokenness, or only representing, pretty nice things, longing for paradise, when there's really that tension of both of those together.
Yeah.
So even theologically, you look at God is a God of justice, but he's a God of mercy. And it's not that you shave off a bit of justice to make God merciful, or shave off a bit of mercy. He's fully just and fully merciful. And those things are in tension with one another. But to be God, that he's both. And so harmonization of that's an aspect of order. So the quadrivium in the, with arithmetic and geometry and music and astronomy, that's the language of number, the language of creation, the theological, philosophical idea of what does it mean to be, to understand the nature and character of who God is through the things that he has made, as Roman 1 talks about, that he's revealed himself, even his eternal power and his divine nature, and since creation. And so that's there's the that's kind of the path of that. And I think historically that's been kind of the path of that. So it's not just about math per se or music theory, but how those point towards a larger aspect of number and order. And then what is the application of that in terms of how we live our own lives, in terms of what music are we listening to, what choices do we make in terms of our time, what decisions are we making with regards to content of worship, or all of those things have then a larger conversation than just a subjective aspect of a preference. Preference does lead, there's an aspect of that, but also there's an undergirding of all of those topics, which are, I think, more theologically significant.
I love the idea in music there's order and harmony that already exists, that we're not, when we make music, we're not inventing, but rather connecting to a reality of, as you said, harmony and order that already exists.
And from the medieval perspective too, I mean, the role of a musician was to reflect the cosmic divine order in what they were creating musically, but then also by its creation and by performing music, by making music, actually that sustained the order as well. So it's a reflection of, but also a sustaining of. And so it's kind of the choice of, like, you're either making things harmonious or you're making things discordant. And by making things harmonious, you're adding to the harmony. By making things discordant, you're fighting against the harmony. And that doesn't mean too, I mean, obviously within the context of music, you've got dissonances. The dissonances resolve. They go somewhere. There's a movement there from one place to from the beginning to the end. There is a sense of beginning and ending. There's a sense of movement towards chords which bring rest, and chords which are unrestful. And there's cause to use those. Once again, it's that tension between the brokenness and the desire for paradise. You've got both of those at play. But there's a story there. There's a musical story that's being unfolded within the context of sounds, let alone lyrics. I mean, that's a whole other layer. But even within music itself, without lyrics, this is still very much at play.
Yeah. And I love the truth that all this beauty, this musical beauty, is also mathematical. Yes. Which is another principle of the quadrivium, that it's all the same language in some way. Who was it who said? You're gonna have to help me with both the person who said it and what they said, but that music is the pleasure of doing math without knowing you're doing math. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, and now that's
maybe it's counting without knowing you're counting, or.
Right, and I can't remember right now if that's Euler or Leibniz, or I don't know, one of those more modern mathematicians. But yeah, it's the it's inherent in there. I think, and that's part of the beauty of what we take some of those things for granted with regards to music because we think of them in terms of music. But when you start talking about music from other identifiable vantage points, and talk about the idea of the physicality of resonance.
Yeah.
That you talk about a glass shattering with a voice, or if you're driving your car and between 25 and 30 miles an hour, there's something that starts rattling.
Yeah.
And 30 miles an hour, it goes away. Well,
Yeah.
you've hit the frequency there in which it's resonant. So there's a lot of ways in which music being counted without knowing that you count, is that a lot of life can be thought through the lens of music. We just don't think of it necessarily in those ways, but it's very much true. I was talking to someone, it was about a year ago, the miracles in the book of Acts, which refer to Christ a number of times, and realizing that even the miracles of bringing healing is one of moving from discord to harmony.
Yeah.
Something that has been broken, restoring it to the order in which it was supposed to be made, and that's a musical or harmonious aspect. I saw a graph in a book on how engines work, and it was showing how all the various gears of a steam engine, you have the different sizes, and so they hit each other. This smaller wheel may go around twice, while this larger wheel goes around one, and so forth. And so you have the frequency with which the wheels intersect. And you can graph that out, and when you graph it out, it looks like sound waves.
Yeah.
And so these principles show up again and again in various ways, but they're all related musically or to the idea of harmonia.
Yeah. I've run into a lot of people who say they like music, but they don't like math. And I don't think that's true. I think they just think they don't like math because they like music. If you like music, you do like math.
Well, and I think part of that is that we don't always teach math the way that we should, and we teach math in ways in which it's easy to not like math.
How do you like to teach math?
I think there's a lot of. I mean, when my daughter was younger, we realized at some point in time that she thinks about numbers the same way that I do, and not the same way as my wife. So I took over math for her during her high school years, but also in the college, some of the college classes. I mean, I think so often of what I was taught in math is here's the formula, now plug in numbers or solve for something, and it's and like you've got to get the formula right, and you have to figure this thing out. How long is this thing, or how long does the train's going in this direction, whatever, but not often taught the principles behind it or the why. I was trying to teach about the figuring out the length of between 2 points on a graph, and there's this complicated formula to go about it. And I realized this is just the Pythagorean theorem. You're dealing with a graph. This is just the hypotenuse of why doesn't anybody talk about that? So the part of the beauty of numbers and the way that numbers play with one another, and I don't think we've lost that sense of the play of numbers, and so how they interrelate that way. And then one of the beautiful things that I've discovered, and that in terms of teaching too, is just the beauty of doing geometry with a good compass, drawing math.
Yeah.
There's such satisfaction with drawing, almost perfect circle, and making straight lines and seeing those things come together and seeing those. I mean, there's a whole book on Euclid's in Euclid's Elements, which is algebra, but he doesn't use numbers. It's drawings, but he's illustrating algebra, but without using formulas. Like, this is brilliant. I mean, if we could, you have things to look at, you have things to make, you can create these things with your hands, with a compass, with a straight edge, and then it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think we skip to the numbers and the quantitative aspect of math, and we leave out the qualitative aspect.
There's a book that I think I got from you called Mathematics for the Non-Mathematician.
Mm-hmm.
Would I have gotten that from you?
Possibly, yeah. Klein.
Yeah. I love that book. I've never gotten through it because it starts getting a little hard after chapter 2 or so. But for one thing I love about that book is it shows how the ancients figured out the circumference of the Earth very accurately. Anyway, we're
Mathematics for Human Flourishing.
I don't know that book.
Francis Hu.
Yeah. Oh, I do know that book. He came on this podcast to talk about it one time.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book too. Just on the discipline of math in a beautiful way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was embarrassing to say. I didn't know that book. Okay. Well, we're about to run out of time. I didn't prepare you for this question. Hopefully, you'll be able to answer it off the top of your head. Because you did pretty well with the music of the spheres off the top of your head, so this may be easier. That is, what are the writers that make you want to write, or the musicians that make you want to make music? Like, where does your desire to go make stuff come from?
Oh, the authors that I gravitate towards, and this is not that I could potentially emulate them, but it's people like Flannery O'Connor or Benoit or Graham Greene that are writing strong stories with rich layers, and there's a whole context and subtext of what's going on there, and it's operating on a number of different levels, and I love even the sacramental aspect of that too. That things matter, that matters, in the metaphysical sense. And in terms of music, I mean, there's. I dip my hands into a number of different things in different genres here and there. The last few years, I've just really enjoyed the choral music of Ola Galo. Just beautiful pieces that are not necessarily so complicated, but are just glorious vocally and exploring those sounds. The older I get too, the more simple I think I enjoy music. In
That's
terms of more stripped down, more essential, and from where I started in studying music to aspects of even chant or 4-part chant or things which are more essential to what music is. Yeah,
I wonder. When I was young, going through school, I was much more interested in being impressed than I am now. Right. There were the complexity. There's certain. I feel differently, for instance, about 17th century poetry, which is so impressive, and I still love it in many ways. But I don't love it the same way I did when I was going through school. Which I was just so impressed that these people could do these really complex things with, metaphysical conceits and stuff. And I'm just not as interested in metaphysical conceits as I used to be. And I wonder if that's just a function of getting a little older.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Well, Greg Wilbur, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm excited about your new album, and I hope a lot of people and a lot of churches benefit from it. So thanks for being here.
It's always good to see you, Jonathan.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com. And to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.